I've been coming to the Thousand Islands my entire life, and as a child with my family, we would vacation up here summers. And 15 years ago, I purchased this property, and the house that I currently live in here now is a full-time residence, and it's fully sustained on a well. And now what's happened is, through the research of Virginia Tech, it's been clearly determined that the wells are contaminated.
So the contaminated water situation that we've been dealing with, we've been in this home for 15 years, and we raised 2 young children here, and it took us some time to figure out kind of what was going on. We thought we were getting bad appliances. We thought we were dealing with quality issues in terms of why we had to get a new washing machine, a new dishwasher. We didn't really understand what was happening until some issues became more publicly aware, and the information came out about the fact that the salt barn is impacting the groundwater. At least that's the feeling of the residents. And so those residents, thankfully, brought that issue into the public eye. And for us, for Andy and I, that was how we first learned not only about the salt contamination that was affecting us, but also the impact that that had on lead levels and other heavy metals that has been in our drinking water since we've moved into this house.
With a number of various chemicals, and specifically chloride, which seems to be tracing back to the DPW salt barns off of Route 12, off of the exit number 50. And Virginia Tech has tested numerous wells south of the salt barn on the Route 12 corridor in the town of Orleans and down through Fisher's Landing, where we are today. And all of these wells seem to show a very high level of contamination, and basically chloride, salt, and other various chemicals.
One of the components of road salt is chloride. Chloride is a corrosive, and it is literally, just like road salt eats your car, it's literally eating the metal components of our appliances. This here is a heavy gauge aluminum spindle that held the drum for our Bosch washing machine. This is about 5 years worth of its life. It should have lasted 30 years. The salt and the road salt in our water corroded and ate away, dissolved the aluminum, and the washing machine fell apart, disintegrated. This guy here is the pressure relief valve from our boiler. You can see the corrosion from the salt of the brass. That's probably was about 6 or 7 years old before it started leaking water everywhere. And then this is probably the second or third of our kitchen faucets. We replace them about every 3 to 5 years. The rubber gaskets are eaten. The valves inside are eaten, so that you can't shut the water off or turn it on. You know, basically everything has been corroded by the road salt. These are all items that should still be functioning perfectly now. All of that being said, you know, while the financial cost is concerning, you know, for me as a father, my real concern is my children's health.
You know, one of our first concerns when we figured out that our lead levels were so high was, of course, for our kids. And they, like I said, they were born here and they had spent their whole early childhood here, and they were 8 and 10 years old when we figured out what was going on with the high lead levels, etc. We rebuilt the whole place top to bottom. There's no lead pipes in our house, but if there's any lead solder, if there's any lead, even the small amount of lead in the, in any of the well parts or any of the components or any of the faucets, anything, then that, because we have this very chlorinated water, it will make that lead available. And that's what's happening in these systems. So that's what's happening with our drinking water.
I bought this property about 8 years ago. I had a single-wide mobile home on here that I used as like a summer residence. Had pretty clean water at the time. Over the years, we've had some cloudy water pop up, and I have recently, 4 years ago, built this home that I'm sitting in right now on the same property. Unfortunately, over the last 4 years, I found the water really damaging the home and damaging some things on the human end of things as well. From us drinking it. Looking around the house, the hot water heater is literally falling to pieces. My granite countertops are getting eaten. My faucets are getting ruined, and we are having water hauled in to drink. We are actually making sure we're washing our heads and hair with the water provided by the town. We're taking precaution on making sure we don't drink any of the water.
Okay, well, come on in and I'll show you what's going on with the plumbing in the house due to the chloride. This filter here is the first stop for water coming in from the well. The red that you see is all the rust created by the chloride that's basically eating the iron lining in the well. And the water comes into the house, and of course you can see that this is all PEX, and all the metal piping and the copper and the solder had to be replaced with PEX because the chloride is eating that too. And then when you look at all the fittings, these handles right here, all of these fittings are all rusted. The only thing it's not plastic. They're all rusted. This rusted here, and down below over here, the fittings that come in and connect to the PEX, all the metal fittings, the compression straps on the plastic piping are all being eaten alive and deteriorating. I've had to replace the straps twice in 6 months due to the chloride. You could see that this is chloride dripping out of the condensation. Oh my God, I never even noticed this. Look, see the white? That's all salt. And that's coming from condensation. Again, filter as much as you can, but you can't filter the chloride. Really all I'm doing is filtering the rust particles so they don't find their way into the house and into all the faucets and into the screens and so on.
About 2 years ago, New York State kindly started providing us with bottled water. So we use the bottled water for drinking, for cooking, and everything else is just suffering under the effects of the corrosive water.
Mainly the salt problem with people losing appliances, kids getting sick, people getting sick, I would think would be enough to raise somebody's eyebrows.
All right, Cleve, you spiked your mom?
Yep.
As a mother, this was a really intense thing to realize that we were not just dealing with salt in our water, but we were dealing with high levels of lead contamination as well. So all I could do was reach out to the people that I was seeing in the news that were helping the residents in Flint, Michigan, and that was Virginia Tech. So for me, it was just a series of emails and cold calls to the people at Virginia Tech, who are obviously the premier experts on figuring out that relationship between, between chlorides, between, in their case, municipal, in our case, groundwater, and they were responsive, and they sent their premier person who deals with well water issues for Virginia Tech at no cost to the residents here to help us figure out what the problems were we were having and what the connection was between the salt and the lead. But the way that salt water interacts with the plumbing, the appliances, the connections, everything in your house Those are very complex systems, and they're looking at all of those things for us to help us understand what's happening between the salt water that's coming into our homes and the tap water that's kind of coming out of our faucets. Groundwater is an important resource. So we've got a couple different components here. We've got the groundwater that's being polluted, and then we also have like the health risks because of what's happening, you know, right in people's homes, right? So for me, it needs to be addressed by the state, because if they have caused this pollution for their own people, and it's causing not just salt pollution, but also that's causing heavy metals like lead in people's drinking water. That's a serious issue, and I think that's where Virginia Tech can be so helpful for us, is just to help us figure out what's really going on, and then get some solutions and some answers, and the state should really be responsible for making sure that they make the situation right for the residents and the families who live here.
So what's happening now is the town of Orleans has been, put into a position where they have to put in a public water line to provide fresh water to homes, which is very unfortunate because that's costing the town in excess of $15 million. $7 million of the dollars is coming through various grants through state and various other resources, but still it's a deficit of $7 million. That $7 million deficit now has to be made up by those individuals in the newly formed water district of an annual assessment of $525 per year for 30 years. And so the frustration is replacing the plumbing, replacing the water heaters, the sinks, the faucets, the shutoff valves, and now another $800 per year due to the fact of pollution to the wells, which neither myself or any other property owner in the area is responsible for.
I can't understand why they wouldn't. I'm a builder. If I had, let's say I had a plowing company and I piled road salt on my property and it contaminated my neighbor's well, New York State would be the first ones here to make me, replace their well, probably pay very large fines, probably put me out of business. It's the only just outcome is for them to pay for the entire water line.
My well was fine. I never had a problem with it. And for a little bit of electricity, I was getting water to my home. And now all of a sudden, that right is going to be taken away from me. And now I'm going to be hit with an $800 bill a year out of my control, and I'm going to be losing access to my well, and I'm going to have to pay this for a long time. So I'm not a big fan of paying that money for something that I didn't do. If I ruined my own well and I had to pay that money, then I would, have to suck it up. But it's kind of unfortunate that I'm paying for somebody else's mistake.
If any one landowner in this water district or in the town of Orleans or in New York State or anywhere in this country were responsible for polluting or adding these chemicals to the groundwater system, there would be all kinds of consequences. And now that additional $7 million that the town has to come up with to provide the water, which we all know we need, that really shouldn't be leveled on the property owner or the individual that's living in their home with their children. That needs to, we need to go back to the source.
I think the question of the water line, the way that will impact us is, number one, it will be a cost to the family that we believe we really should not have to bear, since our water would not be contaminated if it weren't for the actions or inactions of the state government itself. So we believe that cost should be borne by the government and not by individuals who didn't have contaminated water until the state let it happen. So, having to pay for it, certainly having the water line come in is beneficial. We won't have to worry about always making sure that, our kids don't use it for brushing teeth, that we don't use it for anything, that nobody grabs a glass of water by accident and gets a glass full of lead. But we also, are aware of the fact that realistically, this is not a cost that really should be borne by the residents, because it's not something we would have needed if it weren't for the situation that was created by the state.
As it stands right now, the residents who didn't need a water line until New York State, basically poisoned our well, are going to pick up the other, more than half of the cost of this water line. The only just outcome is for them to pay for the rest of the water line. And then we'll happily pay for usage afterwards, and maintenance and everything else, but we didn't need the water line before they poisoned our well. I mean, I think for some, it will not be that big a deal. I think for many, it will be a real burden, and they may end up having to move. You know, and an extra $750 to $1,000 a year, it's a lot of money for a lot of people.
When an entity put in a district over on 342, they didn't have to pay anything. But they have to pay, if the line breaks, they have to pay for it then. They don't even pay O&M. They just pay for water usage.
You know, we need to go back to the source, but simply stated, it's beyond time for finger pointing. Where it is now is it's time to step up, lead the initiative from the state of New York to help resolve this problem outside of assessing people this fee. And you know, the majority of the people in this water district simply do not have an additional $800 per year. They're not getting $800 raises to pay for this cost. And in this particular area, it's one of the highest level, Jefferson County in this particular area is one of the highest levels of poverty in New York State. It's populated also by a vast number of elderly individuals. And the dollars to pay this fee to cover the cost of developing and building this water district comes out of their budget for medications, comes out of their budget for household expenses, medical expenses, food budgets, and so on and so forth. And those dollars just simply are not there. And so, you know, what we're saying is we need the state to step up and be the leader to lead this initiative to help resolve this polluted well problem through the installation of a public water system that provides clean drinking and bathing water to the homes in this water district without having to pay the $7 million to correct it. Certainly there needs to be a water meter and people need to pay for the amount of water that they use on their individual property, but they should not be paying to resolve the pollution issue. Okay, so here's the rub. We're standing in front of the construction site for the North Country Welcome Center. And this building is being constructed at an estimated cost of $15 to $20 million, when just across the street we have the existing visitor center. So the rub is $15 million plus is allocated for the construction of this building when everyone from this point on down the road is subjected to salt water. Businesses in private homes still have salt water, but we can justify this kind of money to build this building when we're asking the state to contribute $7 million to rectify the saltwater pollution problem in the wells along the Route 12 corridor. This area generates millions of dollars in tourism. It's one of the most beautiful areas in New York State, if not the entire country. And it needs and it demands the leadership of New York State to step up to preserve what the natural beauty of the Thousand Islands in the St. Lawrence River, not to step back when we have a situation where we have polluted groundwater system that can be resolved. So, you know, please, you know, New York State, step up, lead the initiative, let's correct the problem and move on and continue to bring tourism and increase revenue and businesses to this area.
There would be more weight if the people actually got a hold of their senators, their congressmen. Myself and the board can scream till we're blue in the face, but we're 5 people. If 500 people all went in the same direction and voiced their concerns, I would think that that would get more of a reaction than just me screaming that everybody is wrong and we are correct.